Back with another podcast this week. North Left Sports here with Kyle Smith. This week we're continuing our MLB preview division by division. Last week we did the National League East, and this week we're going to do the American League East. The American League East is the reigning World Series title holder with the Boston Red Sox. They lost a lot of pieces in the offseason, a lot of it willingly. They didn't want to match the Ellsbury deal to let him go. They didn't want to pay up for Stephen Drew as of this moment. They didn't want him to come back. So, Kyle, you have any quick thoughts on the Boston Red Sox before we get into the lineup and the starters and the bullpen?
They did lose a couple guys, but I liked some of their additions. AJ Przenski, for instance. Nice little platoon at catcher, which I think is smart on a one-year deal. So you don't have to rely on Ross too heavily. And it kind of clears the way for them to continue to develop some of that catching that they have in their minor league system. So I think they had a good offseason. They brought back Napoli, and they'll probably extend Ortiz. So
Probably only a couple years. Ortiz already is 39, I believe.
Yeah, he'll retire there, So, what do you think?
I'm really excited that hopefully Jackie Bradley Jr. can get some run in center field. They tried to use him last year in center. It didn't work out. He may not have been ready. But with his great defense, Gold Glove caliber, and his amazing ability to get on base at a high level, he could be a leadoff candidate. He doesn't have game-changing speed, but he can get you 20, 25 steals in a really good year. And with that great defense, he can be an extremely valuable player and replace Ellsbury. Not immediately and not to the level, but there shouldn't be too much of a drop-off, and he shouldn't be as much of a health concern. And speaking of health, they were pretty healthy in the lineup for the most part last year. Victorino didn't really miss any time. Ellsbury stayed healthy for the most part. Napoli stayed healthy. Kyle, do you think they'll be able to stay healthy?
I think that's always a variable that you really can't predict. So I wouldn't really bank too much on that. We know Napoli has a bit of a hip problem. AJ's a little bit older. Ross is a little bit older. Yet that being said, you think that one of those two guys is going to stay relatively healthy. I like some of their depth in the outfield, though. I think Victorino is a guy who's shown he can play consistently over the course of his career. Gets on base, still pretty quick for his age. I'm impressed by Daniel Nava, late bloomer. This guy's 31, batted 300 last year. He had a pretty decent OBP, and Johnny Gomes is one of those wild card guys coming off the bench that the managers like to use in certain situations. So I feel like if one of their guys in the outfield gets hurt, they're pretty set there. I like a lot of their depth on the infield. I think Bogart sliding to shortstop should be a really great transition for him. I think he's going to play really, really well. I was super impressed with his composure in the playoffs last year. He looks like a total stud. But the real question for me is Will Middlebrooks. I mean, here's a guy who this is a guy 2 years ago who batted .288 at the age of 23 years old, 15 home runs, 325 OBP. But then he took a real dive, 227, 271, 425, triple slash line, and he still had the 17 home runs, but that was in 100 more plate appearances. So, do you think that he is going to bounce back, or do you think that this is a guy that they're going to have to replace in the beginning of the season?
I'm not too sold on Middlebrooks. Not a big fan. I think he got overrated a bit in 2012 because he came up and was so hot, and I think he had a monster game with like 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, or a 3-homer game almost in Fenway. And last year, I don't think he's that bad, but I'm not too sold on him. I think he's like a 250, 300, 400 guy. I think he's a backup third baseman at his peak. I think that they very well may re-sign Stephen Drew to get that stability at short defensively, and there's a little bit of potential there for Drew to be a decent batter, although I'm not too much of a buyer. And Bogarts will slide over third, where he played in the postseason, and his bat can translate to third, and he might be a little too big for shortstop, although anyone who's that talented you want to keep at short for as long as you can because of how much value they can present. I'm not sold on Middlebrooks, and my other concern for the lineup in general, outside of third base, is I'm not too sold on what they're doing in the outfield. I don't know if the platoon will work as well as it did last year with Carp and Nava. Obviously, it was fantastic last year, but Carp and Nava both have never shown to be that good, even just on their platoon splits for that much of a time. So hopefully for Boston, that doesn't fall off. And their two main catchers are both on the wrong side of 35 in AJ and David Ross. So that's always a concern. And I'd like to move on to their starters. I thought they got really lucky last year.
Dude.
I know a lot of credit went to John Farrell, the former pitching coach who they brought over from Toronto to be their manager, and that obviously could have played a role. But just in general, everything taken into account, health, age, and overall stuff translating to stats and results, I thought they got really lucky last year. Kyle, what do your thoughts on their results last year in 2012 to 2013, the change?
Well, one of the things I look at is some of the tremendous pitching they got from guys like Clay Buchholz. I don't think this is a guy who's going to repeat his success. 2 years ago, he had a 2.88 ERA in limited innings. But last year, he had 180 innings and had almost a 5 ERA. I think he's got good stuff when he's healthy. But these are guys, because they're all on the 1-year deal type situation, I feel like that's Lester going into the contract year. Buchholz, I think, is going into a contract year.
He's
close.
2 years out.
2 years out.
He's kind of on the David Price plan in terms of when he hits free agency.
Which, who cares about that? I mean, he's a really inconsistent pitcher.
When he's healthy, he's incredible, but
Yeah.
he's never shown the ability to stay consistently healthy, and he's 29 already.
Yeah. And I think Lester is one of those guys, what you see is what you get. He's either going to have a good, solid season. Kind of reminds me of Mark Burley in a way, but he throws a little bit harder, He's never had a year under a 3.4 ERA except for once, and that was, under a 3.2 ERA. He's never had under a 3.2 ERA, which is, that's not too bad, but it seems like those years might be a little bit behind him. I think he's kind of limited in his pitching, and I think that he kind of relies, personally, I've always felt like he relies on umpires to give him strikes more than actually creating them for himself. So, I don't know. I have some serious questions about this depth. I think they've got, some guys in the minors that they could possibly move up, like Henry Owens, maybe an Alan Webster. I really don't know how far he is, or Barnes. So, I think if you start getting injuries, this is a team that's not really equipped, in the pitching staff at least, to really make a significant run. I don't see Lackey having quite the amount of success. I think we kind of saw the best of Jake Peavy 2 years ago. I don't think he's really going to ever get back there. I wasn't very impressed with his stuff. But that being said, he's a competitor. Ryan Dempster left. So what do you think? Do you like DeBrant moving into the fifth spot of this rotation? Is there anybody that's caught your eye? Do you think they might make a trade? Do you think they might sign a free agent, such as Santana?
I really like their depth. I really like Matt Barnes. He may not have the top end, number 2 starter potential in the future like a Henry Owens, but I really think he's ready to contribute this season. And if DeBrant doesn't, be consistent, if Jake Peavy gets hurt, if Buchholz gets hurt, I feel like he's the first call up. And Anthony Ronaldo, kind of like a, 5th starter type, is ready for the majors as well, and he provides more depth. I think if all of these stars are healthy, Buchholz is the best, but I also think he's the most likely to get hurt, him and Jake Peavy. I will like to say I'm really proud of what Ryan Dempster did, wanting to spend more time with his family, not willing to be like, I made enough money, this $13.5 million I was getting or so would have been really nice, obviously, but I'd rather spend time with my family, and I need to take the year off and semi or quasi-retire. So congrats to you, Ryan Dempster, and Kyle. One of the things that Boston was really known for going into the field postseason, and it really showed, was the bullpen. And they made a significant, high risk, high reward move in signing Edward Mujica in the offseason. Started as St. Louis's closer and had a season-ending injury, and that's how Trevor Rosenthal stepped up into the closer role. But he was pretty good last year, 2.78 ERA, 37 saves, not a high strikeout guy, but really just, kind of like Ujihara, where he knows where his pitch is going to go, and you need to hit it, or it's going to ground into the dirt. Kyle, you want to talk about the bullpen and if Koji can really continue that extreme dominance he showed for pretty much all of the second half last season in the postseason?
Well, considering the Yankees just paid $155 million for the same 2 pitches that Uhara has, yeah, I would definitely say I think he's going to repeat this success. I think his fastball sometimes, it's not quite as dominant as you'd like, which is why I think he's always been knocked throughout his career, but he's been really successful. His splitter was absolutely disgusting last year. Guys were writing home to their moms about how much he had embarrassed them at the plate. And I'm looking at this guy Tazawa, and I think that he was a solid contributor last year. 2 years ago, he was a little bit better, obviously, but I think that he's still going to be a solid reliever who's going to come in. I think that the bullpen's really going to be a strength, but it really does depend on that starting rotation, whether or not they can stay healthy. I think they have a really good season, but at the same time, I think it's very injury dependent. So, that being said, do you have any more thoughts about the Red Sox?
I will like to point out that just keep this guy on your radar. He's already on the major league roster, but Brandon Workman, his ERA was 5 as a reliever, but a lot of his peripheral pitching stats, K per 9 as 10.15. He could have a really strong year setting up for Koji Uehara. Mm-hmm. So I just want to point him out. He could have a really good year. And Kyle, you want to move into some over-unders really quick? You ready for the game?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Over-under 30 saves for Uehara.
Over.
Okay, I agree with you. Over-under 30 home runs for David Ortiz.
Over.
Okay. I will take the under. It will be very close. We didn't really talk about Ortiz much, but he was absolutely fantastic last year. Obviously, postseason numbers destroyed it. Anything you want to add about Ortiz? How long can he sustain this?
I think he could sustain this as long as his body lets him. I mean, the power may fall off, but I mean, he's kind of going to be one of those Victor Martinez types. I mean, I'm not
as a lefty.
I'm not comparing him to Victor Martinez,
right.
But I'm just saying a lot of people doubted his ability to come back after that injury, and the thing you can't teach is just good hitting. And David Ortiz is one of the greatest hitters in the game right now.
2009, 2010 are a long time ago. These last 2 seasons are just really good for David Ortiz.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how much better he's gotten.
All right, Kyle, one of my favorite second basemen and someone you're not too fond of, yeah. Dustin Pedroia, okay? Over under 200 hits for Dustin Pedroia.
Oh. Over.
Okay. I will agree with you. I think that he will not break his personal record of 213, but he'll be at like 202, 203. Pedroia is amazing.
Yeah. It's
all I gotta
hard
say.
to dog that. I mean,
yeah.
He's going to get 700 plate appearances. So, that being said, you got to figure mathematically he's going to get probably 200 hits.
Okay, for the last one, Kyle, I want to make sure I get one for the pitchers on here. Over-under on Clay Buchholz. We're going to do a couple of these for him because I feel like he's really interesting if he stays healthy, a potential, based on what he did last year, Cy Young potential candidate when healthy. So, over-under 150 innings for Clay Buchholz.
Over.
Okay. Frame of reference, folks, 212. He almost hit 190 last year, 108. Over-under 150 strikeouts.
Under.
Okay. His alt career high, shockingly, 129 in 190 innings. So, could be a good one. And over-under on the whip, 1.05.
Over.
Okay, I'll take the under on that one. But Clay Buchholz, as we talked about, a very interesting player. So moving on to the next divisional foe, and specifically in terms of the Red Sox, foe is capitalized. We're going to talk about the New York Yankees. Obviously, they had a very interesting offseason. We talked about it in the offseason report card kind of podcast. They spent a lot of money Jeter's coming back for his farewell tour. I don't think it's going to be as important as Rivera's in terms of how much other fans love him, because everyone loved Rivera. But Jeter, obviously, first ballot Hall of Fame lock, one of the greatest Yankees of all time. The Yankees spent a lot of money on Ellsbury, Beltran, McCann, Tanaka, and they just spent a lot of money re-signing Brett Gardner. We'll get into that because I think that was a pretty big, massive overpay. Kyle, do you want to start talking about how the lineup and their injury concerns, how old they are, who's going to bounce back, who's going to stay where they're at?
Well, I heard they called Sandy Koufax the other day and asked him if he would consider pitching for them. So I would definitely say that age seems to be a problem for the Yankees. They don't tend to notice it much. But when I look at their lineup, I have a hard time arguing with their outfield right now. I kind of like their outfield. I think it's one of the better outfields in baseball, and that's kind of weird to say because I wouldn't have even been able to say that at all last year. But Gardner, when healthy, we know he's an elite defender. We know the guy gets on base. He's just a crafty player that you wouldn't want to spend $52 million on. Like, this is more of a Moneyball type player that you try to buy low on rather than overpaying him to do something that he's not expected to do. I really liked Soriano in that ballpark. I thought that was a great pickup last year. He was really fun to watch in the Yankees uniform. He felt right at home. I just think that if that's your backup left fielder, you could do a lot worse. I wouldn't even be surprised to see him get moved like halfway through the season for something. Not that they would do that, but I'm just saying. I like Ellsbury in center, elite defense. I wouldn't count on him replicating that power ever again, those 32 home runs from a couple years ago, but he's still going to get on base, probably going to steal 40 bases. He might hit 10 to 20 home runs if you're lucky in that bandbox there. Beltran, I like the platoon there with Suzuki. You got a lot of experience over there. You can kind of pick your matchup, I guess, if you wanted to give Beltran a day's rest. You know, Ichiro is going to provide some decent defense. Also, you know, every pitcher has a hard time dealing with Ichiro. How do you like this outfield? Do you think it's just too suspect of injury, or how do you think it compares to Boston's, for instance?
In terms of comparing to Boston, they have a lot more potential in the outfield, I would agree.
Yeah.
But I would also say that Gardner, Ellsbury, Beltran, the projected starters across the outfield, all huge injury risks.
Yeah.
Soriano, you don't want anywhere on the defensive alignment. You want him at DH where you can utilize his power because he can't play the outfield. Ichiro, while it's good he can play every position in the outfield, he's obviously past his prime, and this is kind of his retirement year almost as well,
Yeah.
you know, in a way like Jeter's. I feel like the key to this team in terms of hitting, outside of health obviously, is going to be what are they going to get out of Mark Teixeira? I mean,
They need those home runs.
they really need him to stay healthy because when he's healthy, he's a very good defensive first baseman. Although at age 33, that's probably starting to slip. I haven't looked at the zone rating numbers or anything, so I can't totally comment on that. But, you know, if he's going to be a 250 hitter like he's shown to be the last few years, he really needs that OBP to be up in the 350s, 360s to go along with near 500 slugging. Like, he needs to make up for that drop in average from his prime and really show that he can still be a really important part of this team. He needs to be up there with 25, 30 home runs. He needs to be near 100 walks because you know you're going to get 100 strikeouts with him most likely. And if you can count on him at first base every day, even if, you know, Jeter needs a few days off or Brian Roberts gets hurt, which is probably going to happen within the first 3 weeks, or if Nunez just can't be a starting third baseman, at least you know one corner's locked down. Kyle, do you feel like Teixeira may be the most important hitter on this team?
I definitely could agree with that. I think that you got a lot of weaknesses on the other side of the infield. So if he doesn't play well, they are handcuffed because he's getting paid very handsomely to do what he's doing, but I would almost argue that Teixeira. I think he's going to do well in a more protected lineup than he has been the last 2 years. You know, obviously being injured, you haven't really seen it anyways. But I think McCann's going to be the guy for me. because you just brought this guy in on a 5-year deal, and we know when you give a guy money like this who's a slugger, great defensive catcher still, great leader by all means, but
Great leader, yes. Great defensive catcher, I would say not anymore.
okay, probably a good catcher though.
He's solid. I'm not saying he's bad. He's not Jesus Montero.
But if he doesn't play well, that's a bad sign for a player's confidence going into a 5-year, $85 million deal, especially when he's expected to transition to first base.
First year in the New York spotlight, coming from Atlanta.
But
People think he may be the next Posada in terms of, a 5-6 year catcher that is kind of the leader of the team.
yeah, no, that's what's expected of him. Obviously, I think he'll be a good player, but I think that those two guys really have to step it up. I'm looking at this infield. I see Roberts over at second, Nunez at third, with possible platoon of Kelly Johnson.
I like the Kelly Johnson
I like
pickup.
it.
And
I like
another minor player that you all need to keep your eye on is Scott Sizemore.
Yeah.
Scott Sizemore's always been able to hit pretty well, and he's never been able to stay healthy. And he's also someone that can play multiple positions on the diamond. Second, third, outfield, and even if you had to for a quick pinch, he could play short. It probably wouldn't be pretty,
Yeah.
but he'd be willing to go out there and be a gamer. So
Well,
he's
you got
someone.
Brendan Ryan too.
Yeah, but Brendan Ryan also can't hit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, he
and
did hit
according to
292.
some of us, Brendan Ryan's about 48.
Right.
So that's a little inside joke. But let's move on to the starting pitching because it's another really interesting topic. CC Sabathia has kind of reshaped his body a little bit finally, trying to show up Prince Fielder and the aging stars who are out of weight who can look better. They re-signed.
was only 30.
They re-signed Kuroda, who had a really good first half and kind of fell off a bit in the second half.
Yeah.
Tanaka, obviously, they put a ton of money into him, but the pitcher who we both kind of think is going to be the best starting pitcher on this team this year, Ivan Nova. I know Kyle's itching to talk about him, and since I'll spend a lot of time talking about another pitcher on another team in a few, Kyle, I'll let you start off talking about Ivan Nova and our conditional love for him.
Well, the one thing that scares me is he only pitched 140 innings last year. So, I don't want to bank too much on this, but he had a 3.5 WAR, a 3.10 ERA, which is very similar to what he did 2 years ago. His strikeouts are always high. His walks relatively low. I just think he's got the makeup to pitch in a big city, and that's very rare. He's a New York grown prospect. I think I think the change that he made last year, just to be a little bit more aggressive and trust his fastball, but also, try and get a little bit of cut on the end of it, was just a really solid move. You saw it work out for him. He felt more comfortable in his mechanics. I think that he's going to take his place atop this rotation by the end of the year. But the one thing that bugs me about this New York Yankees offensive pitching staff, or I guess defensive pitching staff, whatever you want to say, is you got Tanaka and Kuroda are kind of the same pitcher. So you're going to roll out your second...
Tanaka's a much younger version. He should have more life with the fastball, but they both are very splitter heavy as their main secondary pitch.
Yeah, and that bugs me because you got guys that are back-to-back days going to go up against a very similar pitcher. So if you struggled against him, you almost have a redemption game the very next day against the very same type of pitches, which I think is going to get them into trouble because I think on some of these road... I would be trying to separate these guys as much as possible.
That's going to be an issue because CC Sabathia, he's going to be slotted as the number one. He has the track record. Even if we both feel Nova will have a better year, you can't put a lot of money onto that.
I think Sabathia will have a bounce back.
He'll definitely bounce back. I agree. But Sabathia is a lefty, but then Kuroda, Tanaka, Nova, all righties.
Yeah.
So it's hard to break that up, especially if CC's your number one, because they're projected number 5, David Phelps, who's a lefty, not good.
Well, I would just think it'd be better to go Tanaka.
You mean even
Nova,
though
Kuroda, just because at least that way you're seeing something a little bit different.
Right.
Phelps is an interesting guy. He's a 5th starter. I think that they're a little weak on their rotation. I think that they're going to have to rely on a lot of health, and they've definitely got their fingers crossed. This bullpen's a little interesting. I think Robertson will be a good closer. That being said, I'm not very impressed by his stuff.
You've always been a big Robertson guy.
Yeah, but I just don't think he's got good makeup. I've always been impressed by his demeanor. I think he goes out there and pitches hard. I think he's a good competitor. But I just think that sometimes he's just not good enough. And I don't mean that in the wrong way. I just don't know if he's going to be up to the expectations, and the Yankees are known for being really impatient if you don't perform, and which obviously they've kept Robertson around for a long time, but there's a big difference between the 8th inning and the 9th. So what do you think about this team? Do you look at their starting pitching and think that they can hold up all year?
I actually think that the starting pitching will be a source of strength in terms of staying healthy. CC missed a few starts last year, still pitched 211 innings.
Mm-hmm.
Tanaka, obviously going from Japan to Major League, there'll be an adjustment in terms of how many days off you get, but that dude pitched on 3-4 days rest in the playoffs a few times. Kuroda's always been one for the most part to always have that ball every 5th day, and Nova, he's a little bit of the wild card, but David Phelps has always stayed healthy. Mm-hmm. It helps that he's not a big fireballer. In terms of the bullpen, I believe in Robertson. He will not be very flashy. He will not have Kimbrel-like high strikeout numbers. But they do have a couple of minor relievers that I'm big fans of, and it's not because they're both former Mariners. Matt Thornton has always been a solid reliever for the Chicago White Sox. Not a big high strikeout guy for the most part, but gets the job done. Mm-hmm. He'll be interesting, but the guy I really like is Sean Kelly. Last season, his ERA was a little bit too high, and his whip was high, and the walks are always going to be an issue with him. But 71 strikeouts in 53 innings. He had almost a 12K per 9, so he can definitely potentially step up in that 8th inning role as kind of a lights-out 8th inning guy that can strike out the side when called upon. Yeah. So I just want to point out a couple minor relievers for them and kind of be the guy that's pointing the arrow at these minor players. That's kind of how it's looking so far. But Kyle, anything you want to add before we jump on over-unders for this team?
I really hope that Jeter has a bounce-back year. I'm rooting for him big time. I think they could have an interesting lineup, a very veteran-savvy team, and I think hopefully they have a lot of fun, and I hope he bats 300.
Yeah, I think
it'd be nice.
We'll talk about the Jeter thing really quick, because that's another thing I wanted to touch on really quick that I had my mind on if I wanted to bring it up or have a whole different podcast for this. But we're kind of crunched on time right now, as in life. So, how many Hall of Famers are on this team right now? Jeter, lock, yes.
Yeah.
Ichiro, lock, yes.
Yes.
Carlos Beltran, I say he's a Hall of Famer.
I'd say he's a Hall of Famer.
CC Sabathia is a lock to me.
Yeah, he's Hall of Fame.
Folks, he could be your next 300-win pitcher. He already has 200. Yeah.
I mean, maybe Kershaw.
Hernandez is young enough to do it, but he's been so low on the wins, it's interesting. Now it gets a little bit trickier. Can Ellsbury stay healthy enough to become a potential Hall of Famer?
I say no.
I say no as well, but he definitely has had monster seasons where he could be one. Soriano has a lot of high counting stats. 400 home runs, but I don't think he's close because his defense was so bad. But Mark Teixeira is interesting.
He's interesting. I mean, but I think his average is going to hurt him, and then the injuries the last couple years. It's kind of he's gotten to the point where he's almost. I don't know. If he could have even batted 270 or 280, he would have helped himself a lot. But
his defense is a big positive though.
Oh yeah, but I mean, just Hall of Fame, you expect it a little bit better in both ways.
All right, really quick before we over-unders and talk about Tampa Bay. Alex Rodriguez, we have to mention him, and I'm going to mention him by saying this. I don't want to talk about him. Kyle, do you want to talk about him?
I don't want to talk about him.
Cool. All right, Kyle, over-under 50 steals for Jacoby Ellsbury.
Under, but by like 5 or 6.
Okay. Over-under, Derek Jeter. Does he get 200 hits? Him and Ichiro are kind of the kings of this. If he gets 200 hits this season, or a little bit lower, he'll be at 3,500 for his career. That's why I picked 200. It's a big stretch, but people forget 2012 he led the majors in hits. So
I say he does it.
I agree. I think he's going to go out on top in terms of personal achievement.
He hit a home run on his 3,000th hit, or what was it?
Yeah, it was.
Like, that's just Jeter.
Yeah.
So Jeter.
He has exactly 525 doubles for his career. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
If he would have been able to play last year and have this be his last year, he could have got to 2,000 runs.
Jeez.
That would have been crazy. I mean, he has a career OBP of 381.
That's
So
awesome.
he should get every vote for the Hall of Fame, just like Greg Maddux should have this year,
Yeah.
just like Randy should and Pedro should. Whoever
Yes.
doesn't vote for these people should not have a vote.
I agree.
Mark Teixeira, over under 25 home runs.
Over.
I agree.
Yeah.
Brian McCann, over under 20 home runs.
Over.
I take the under.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Jacob, I don't want to do another Jacoby. That's not really interesting. Carlos Beltran, over under 100 games started in the outfield, not counting DH. In the outfield, 100 games started.
Over, but barely.
I take the under because I think he's going to get hurt this year.
Okay.
I don't want to wish hurt on anyone, obviously, blah, 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 but I feel like he's going to miss a little bit of time. Over under for CC Sabathia, 200 strikeouts.
Under.
Okay. 17 wins.
Over.
A WAR of 3.5.
Over.
ERA under 3.5.
Under.
Okay. I agree with all of yours except for the wins.
Okay.
So we're pretty in line with CC Sabathia. Tanaka. Over under 15 wins.
Under.
How many
14.
how many strikeouts does he get?
Over 170.
Okay, I agree
But I
with
don't
that.
see him breaking 200.
Okay, and the last one we'll do for the Yankee over-unders. We talked about how we both love him. Ivan Nova. We're going to do a few for him, and then I'll start my little rant about Tampa Bay. All right? Over-under on Ivan Nova. 17 wins.
Under.
I take the over.
Okay.
I think he'll hit 20.
All right.
He'll be one of like 3 or 4 pitchers that hit 20. I think he'll get hit a lot more often this season. Over-under 150 strikeouts.
Over.
I take the over as well.
Yeah.
Over-under 200 innings.
Under, sadly.
I will take the over.
Okay.
Over under a 3 ERA.
Over.
I take the under. Over under 1.2 whip.
Under.
I will take the over on that one.
Okay.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah. I feel like he will give up a good amount of hits.
Yeah.
That's kind of my worry with him. So, moving on to the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Joe Madden, amazing manager. I just want to start off with him. Him and Andrew Friedman, the GM, they work really well in unison. They always have a plan. They're really great at defensive shifts. That helps their defensive metrics, helps their pitchers. The David Price saga didn't get resolved this offseason. I think they're going to be good, so I think he's going to stay on the Tampa Bay all season. He'll get traded next offseason, or could be possible to work out a team-friendly extension. The Will Myers, James Shields trade, I feel like worked out for both teams, and I feel like it worked out really well for Tampa. They have depth starting, and Will Myers has settled in nicely as a number 4 batter in their lineup. He's going to provide great protection and production behind Evan Longoria. Kyle, Tampa, start us off talking about the lineup. Was Evan Longoria finally going to have an MVP year like everyone has expected forever? What are they going to do at catcher? They have 3 really good starters. Where's Zobrist going to play? Because he plays everywhere. What are your thoughts?
I think you're going to see Zobrist move around a little bit. I think Longoria, I don't see the MVP year. I think he's a great player. I just think he's so team-oriented, and I think that he's got a little bit of an injury history there that they're carefully monitoring. So I think Madden's going to do everything he can to try and avoid that mentality for Longoria, because he needs to just focus on being a good everyday player that's worth every dime of that contract, because as you may know, Tampa Bay has struggled keeping guys because of their low income situation. So I do see him having a great year. However, I really like their catching situation. I thought it was a good trade for the Reds. That being said, the Reds also have a tremendous scouting department. So I think it was likely a pretty decent trade. But I like Hannigan. They had already locked up Molina in the offseason, so It's going to be a nice platoon there. I like the fact that they brought Loney back. They've still got Joyce, who they can put in there. Rodriguez kind of plays everywhere all over their team, which is really nice value, and he's kind of one of those random guys that you really don't know what to expect, like a lot of these guys on the Tampa Bay Rays. Desmond Jennings, I think, is going to play some good outfield. So the guy that I think are the two guys that are going to be the most important, I think you can agree with me on this one, is Will Myers and Longoria. Not only are we expecting Longoria to be a solid player, but I think that the star power onus needs to go all the way onto Will Myers. They traded James Shields, who everybody knows, a high makeup pitcher, had a tremendous season last year. It's very hard for them to let him go, and I think the trade worked out for them magnificently. I think Myers is fantastic, putting them in a great position to have the type of power they need at the cost that they need for the next couple years. Do you still view this pitching staff as a tremendous strength, even with Hellickson's injury and the possible looming David Price trade?
I'm really sold on the starting pitching staff. One thing I want to mention about the lineup really quick before I move on to the pitching is David DeJesus. I feel like was a very solid pickup. They obviously needed a everyday starter in left to really help them with having that outfield. They didn't have to platoon if they didn't want to. DeJesus, Desmond Jennings, who although hasn't turned into the next Carl Crawford, still a very solid player. Will Myers, pretty good outfield. But David Price had a little bit of a down year last year, got hurt for the first time, struggled a bit at times as well with his command, but really came on in the second half. There's no doubt that he is a ace. He may not be on the top echelon of aces with, Hernandez, Darvish, Kershaw, and those folks, and, Verlander, but he's definitely up there. He's a little bit older than you would expect because he's already 28, but just look at his 2012. 2.56 ERA, 25 record, 205 strikeouts, pitched over 200 innings, 3 straight years. Last year he almost did it, but like I said, he missed some time. Did have 4 complete games, but in terms of David Price, the best thing about him is he's kind of a new Cliff Lee in terms of 151 strikeouts last year, 27 walks.
Jeez.
You're not getting a free pass from him. His whip is always going to be low because of that, and that's very beneficial. But I feel like Matt Moore will have the best season on this team from a starting pitching standpoint. I feel like he's going to put it all together. Last year started out really well, and then he kind of faded a little bit. But he's only 24. Went 150 innings last year, missed a little bit of a time, but the year before that, 177. He has no restrictions. Improved last year on all of his numbers. Strike out a batter. Needs to get that control down a little bit. Needs to work on those walks. If he can get those walks down a bit, he can be extremely dominant. He could be a Cy Young type winner. So, Kyle, any thoughts on the rotation?
I think you nailed it on the head right there. I really like Cobb and Archer as 3 and 4s. Archer's been in their system for the last 7 years. He's the epitome of Rays development. I think he's going to continue that success because he's been in their system for so long. I think he's a smart player. I think that they knew what they were getting when they called him up, and I think he's performed exactly to expectations. Some of the questions I have at that 5 spot are alleviated by some of their deep pitching. I think Jake Odorizzi will, step up.
He's going to take that job from Hellickson by June.
Yeah. And I still think Hellickson's a pretty decent pitcher that you can easily throw out there to give a guy a day of rest. Alex Colomé and Annie Romero are probably likely to see time this year, which is good for Tampa Bay. Always good for them. I really like Jake McGee as a relief pitcher. He's got dominant stuff.
Hits 100 from time to time. Sits 97.
Yeah, Peralta is going to be the closer. And so I just like what they're doing. They're always in the mix. I think out of all the teams that we've analyzed so far, Boston and New York, I think they have the best shot to win this division. I think that there's just so much depth everywhere. You can't really question anything that they've done lately, and that says a lot about their organization. So, how do you feel about some of these relief pitchers? Do you think they're going to be good enough to get Tampa Bay's subpar starting lineup? I mean, because we know that they're one of those teams that's really Are they going to get that much out of Escobar again? There's questions in the lineup.
Yeah.
But this pitching staff's always been their strength and good defense. So
Yeah. Joe Madden really manages the bullpen well, like he does his entire team. Jake McGee, that dude is a monster, like we said. High strikeout guy. Could easily be the closer this year. Peralta doesn't work out. Only 27, failed starter, but was able to convert that into more power in his fastball. Alex Torres, very solid reliever. Very low ERA, very low WHIP. Decent strikeout rate, 26. I mean, they really kind of just crank out these prospects. I mean, they kind of struggled a bit on the hitting prospects, like a lot of baseball, but they cycle in these pitchers. And Peralta, I think he's going to lose the job to McGee, but not because of his fault, just because McGee's really going to step into that role and be that closer
Heath Bell's
for him.
not bad either. I mean,
I'm trying to avoid Heath Bell. They really
They
easily.
got him for free though.
Yeah, they could have another reclamation project. I mean,
They do that.
He is a extremely different pitcher than Rodney. Like
Oh,
Rodney's like,
Oh yeah.
here comes 98 and a crazy changeup. Where Heath Bell's like, yo, hit this little slider that's on the outside corner, and if I miss by an inch, it's a home run.
Yeah.
That's kind of Heath Bell at this point. I'm not a big fan of Hellickson. Alex Cobb will not repeat his season last year, although he will be good still. Chris Archer will step into that number 3 role. I'm really big on him. I wish that he had a better third pitch, but
Yeah.
still, he gets the job done, no doubt. Yeah, Kyle, anything you want to add before I throw a few over-unders at you, and then we move on to the very interesting team as of late, Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, I just think that this is one of those Moneyball type teams where you really don't know by game where some of this production is going to come from, but I think it's really interesting. I'm always excited to see Tampa Bay Rays call-ups, so I think that'll be an interesting piece to keep an eye on, is all the prospects and whether or not Escobar can repeat that successful year.
Is there any shot they trade David Price at the midseason point if they are somehow at the bottom of the division? Can they get the right value for him moving to mid-year?
If they're at the bottom of the division, I think they just make a trade.
Where would he go? We talk about this all the time, but I mean, he is the most likely great player to get moved if a team falls out.
I think you would look at Boston.
Really, in the division.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
That's a good point. That is a really good point.
I've always said Arizona.
Arizona would be good. Texas would be. I know. It's just.
They don't have the major league ready prospects to move. That's my only
But
concern with Texas.
at
Not
that-
they don't have great prospects. Tampa Bay wants to
We're also
contend every year.
Yeah, but we're also operating under the pseudonym that they're going to be in last place and in sell mode.
Yeah, but
And
they
so
also
if
want
they
to
can
be
get
good
prospect-
next year, though, as well.
Right, but if you.
Aflalo and Odor won't be ready next year at the start of the season, most likely.
No, but Chi will be. And that's totally a Rays type player. Alex Gonzalez.
Right.
There's a lot of I'm not saying they're the number one candidate. I think that the Cubs could be a team that tries to get in that. We know that they're trying to get a guy locked up long term.
I feel like David Price would be interested I feel like since he's so in touch with social media and the fans, he would want to be the savior of the Cubs, quote unquote, if he came there, then they all of a sudden won a World Series.
Yeah, I could see that. White Sox are a streaky team. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of teams that we wouldn't have expected coming out of the woodworks these days to make moves. The Giants.
They don't have the prospects.
But
Maybe they lose their mind and trade Bumgarner. I don't know. That'd be a horrible idea, but
yeah.
I think Bumgarner's better than David Price, but we'll get to that in a few weeks.
Right.
So, over-unders for Tampa Bay. David Price, top 5 Cy Young finish.
I'm gonna say yes. He has a good chance. So over.
I will say under.
Okay.
Will Myers, 30 home runs.
Over.
Oh, okay.
I want
That was
him.
quick. All right, let's do a couple more Will Myers ones. Over under 100 RBI.
Just under, because they're not an offensive team.
Over under OPS 900.
Over.
Okay. I will agree with the 30 home runs. I will not agree with the OPS.
Hard.
And I will think he'll get over 100 RBI.
Okay.
So, a little bit of discussion there. Evan Longoria. Over under 270 batting average.
Over.
I agree. Over under 30 home runs.
Under.
Disagree. He's getting over under 100 RBI.
Over.
I agree. I think they'll have two players over 100 RBI because
Okay.
I think Tampa's going to score a lot more runs than people expect.
Yeah, they might, and they always do.
Yep.
They always do. But here I am being that guy. So
Jake McGee, will he be the starter for the majority of the season? I mean, the closer. My bad.
I say no.
I agree. I think they'll want to use him in the 8th inning
Yeah.
because it's more important depending on who's coming up to bat in the 8th
Yeah.
and the 9th. And for the last one, Desmond Jennings. Catalyst for a lot of discussion. Never developed. Over under 25 steals for you fantasy players out there.
Over.
I disagree.
I think he'll get 25
I
bags.
think he'll get hurt.
Yeah.
So, we both love Tampa Bay. Ben Zobrist, you're amazing. You're what Willie Bloomquist should be in the eyes of every Mariner fan. Baltimore Orioles. They've been very busy this last couple weeks. They decided they wanted all of a sudden spend money, and they just signed Nelson Cruz to a 1-year, $8 million deal. Just on the face of it, 1-year deals, never that big of an issue with them. And Nelson Cruz for only $8 million after you already lost the draft pick for Ubaldo. I have no issue with that deal. As a Mariner fan, not a big fan of Nelson Cruz, as we'll talk about, but for $8 million, I would have had no issue with that. And Ubaldo Jimenez, they signed him to a multi-year deal. They're really hoping that second half success in Cleveland last year translates. They have a great pitching coach in Cleveland, and I think that Baltimore's pitching coach I actually like as well. Their lineup now with Nelson Cruz has a ton of power.
Yeah.
They have about 6 guys that could hit 20 home runs.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam Jones has done it. Markakis, I think, has done it. Chris Davis obviously has done it.
Marquez hasn't done it in like 4 years.
Yeah, but he's
still,
done it.
Yeah.
Wieters can do it. Hardy can do it. Machado can do it.
Yeah.
And Manny Machado, one of the funnest players to watch in baseball, likely to be ready opening day after tearing that knee ligament.
Freak.
Yep. So Kyle Smith, what do you want to talk about? Obviously, they're moving Nelson Cruz probably into left field.
I think they're gonna
second
play him
base,
right.
really, and they're going to
Yeah.
move Markakis to left.
I'd have to look at their stadium. I'm not 100% familiar, but I just know in general right field is a little bit easier to play, and so I don't
Well,
know.
Markakis is definitely a better defensive
Yeah.
outfielder than.
So I guess
Nelson
it will
Cruz.
really. I mean, they already have him slotted into right field, so maybe Cruz will just play left field. We've discussed this. He's not the best outfielder.
No.
I think he gets too bad of a rap, though. Personally, I think if he's not an average defender, he's very close to just being slightly below average defender.
I disagree. I think he's really bad, but I do like his throwing arm. I think he has a solid arm, and I'm not going to bash him and everything. He has
Yeah.
a solid arm in the outfield. I think that his main issue is he just takes really bad routes.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah,
he's not a smart player.
Yeah, he's not very. Yeah, it's not his thing.
Yeah.
He focuses on batting a lot.
No,
which
he
is-
doesn't focus on batting. He focuses on hitting home runs, and he's successful at it.
Yeah.
But he does not focus on batting. You can see his OBP will tell you that.
I think his OBP's been getting better. Personally, I think that he's.
So you see the 3-year dip. Ignore that and look at the 1-year little blip at 32 and think it's improving.
Well, I mean, his splits are pretty good. He's been batting as good at home as he has away the last 2 years. He's slightly been projecting upwards, and I think that last year this is a guy who had 27 home runs in only 100 games. I mean, that alone is worth $8 million to me. I mean, that's what Marlon Byrd got $8 million a year, and he's much older. And I think that
He got 2 years somehow.
yeah,
What
he
the
got
f-
and he got 2 years.
What?
which
That's
is just,
ridiculous.
is absolutely mind blowing. Ruben Amaro.
He's horrible.
Yeah, but I really don't. I'm not really sure how I feel about their second base position. Jamal Weeks. I expect Hardy to be awesome. Machado awesome. Davis awesome. Jones, I think, it's a little bit disappointing for me last year, but still really good. Or solid, I should say.
Maybe the worst Gold Glove winner last year, but
Yeah.
but he's not
Yeah, but
horrible. He just
just-
shouldn't have been the Gold Glove center fielder. Lagares for the Mets should have won it,
yeah. So I think.
and in the American League, it probably should have been. I thought Martin was fantastic last year for the Rangers.
Yeah, he was really good. He just didn't play a whole lot.
Right.
He kind of came on
you
towards the end of the
know-
year. It wasn't. If Borges had played more,
Yeah, that dude's
he
incredible.
would have probably been in that conversation. But
R.I.P. Franklin Gutierrez.
Yeah, right. I really like this lineup though. I think it's kind of dependent on injuries, but I think they're going to be a solid team. I did not understand the Jamal Weeks for Jim Johnson trade whatsoever. I thought they got weaker there. I don't think their bullpen's a disaster by any means, but I just did not see the point in getting rid of such a high character guy like that. Billy Bean did a great job on that trade. But besides that, how do you feel about their pitching? Do you think that the Ubaldo signing and Cruz signings are just icing on the cake for these two, or is their pitching staff going to take that next step? Are they going to need Dylan Bundy to come up halfway through the year to save them? Where do you see this lineup slating amongst this division then compared to the rest of the AL?
They definitely don't have as good a starting pitching as Boston, the Yankees, or Tampa. I think that order those top three however you want, then there's a gap there for me in terms of starters for sure, and then it's Baltimore and Tampa, and Baltimore, Toronto, and I would take Toronto. I think Baltimore is the worst starting rotation in this division. Kyle, quick thoughts on my statement before I continue.
I think that they're one of the deepest. So I mean,
Deepest isn't good though.
No,
at all. That just means there's not a fall off from your bad starter to your next bad starter,
which is important to me in a game where injuries happen all the time. So, to me, the longevity of being able to call up Bundy as an elite prospect,
who hasn't really pitched since his Tommy John though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Bundy's amazing.
He's a freak.
If he comes back to what he was, where he was a top 5 prospect, and I believe the number 1 pitching prospect in baseball.
Yeah, he was 2 years ago.
He can step in. Maybe they'll let him throw his cutter now.
I think Gosman's going to be better too.
He has to be.
I think
he has to be better.
He only pitched 47 innings.
Yeah, but he didn't improve in the minors, which was the real issue.
Yeah, but
he has tons of talent.
He pitched 47 innings. He had 50 strikeouts and 14 walks.
Yeah.
I mean, he had the 5.23 ERA.
He got hit around.
But he's a change-up pitcher. I mean, like I said,
he throws 97, so he's a change-up fastball
I know,
guy.
but that's
when you throw 97, your change-up looks a lot better.
Yeah, exactly, and I think
that's what happened to Ubaldo.
He's got a strong change-up, and I think I love guys with a strong change-up. I just think it's a little bit more reliable pitcher than the slider because
it's easier to control for one.
Yeah, the slider is just such a crazy pitch. Much more a fan of.
When I look at the rotation going down to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, comparing it to every other team, I think
not the top tier. You're right.
I think that when you do it that way, they're definitely the weakest.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Tillman, he's very improving. They got him in the Eric Bedard deal where they got Tillman at Adam Jones from Seattle. Nice rape job there.
You think it's weaker than the Blue Jays?
Yes.
What?
Yes, and when you go 1 to 5, yes. I just want folks really quick. I want you to go on ESPN, go to Chris Tillman's Pillar page, and tell me that his picture he just looks like a redneck idiot. I mean, it's really bad. But he's a pretty solid pitcher. 3.71 ERA, had a really good wins above replacement of 4.4, better than John Lester last year. Developing guy, 25. But my concern is when he's your supposed ace and you followed up with Ubaldo, that's a concern for me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if Ubaldo does not continue what he did in the second half for Cleveland. And then after that, it's a who's who of 4th and 5th starters and who might be good this day and might be horrible the next. Chen's interesting. Gonzalez is interesting. Bud Norris he was okay in Houston for a couple starts. He was kind of thrown away for a good reason, which is exactly why, as Kyle said, and I agree, Gausman really needs to develop. I don't know if he's going to start with Baltimore. I would not think so. I think he's going to be in AAA for, mid-May or so, and hopefully he can lock down that third pitch and he can really get his command on point and his control on point because he can step in and be a 3 starter. That's how talented he is. Their bullpen really good. Showalter's great at managing the bullpen. I don't know who's going to be the closer. Hopefully it's not Tommy Hunter. He's pretty horrible, as they have listed on ESPN. So, Kyle, do you have any more thoughts about the relieving core and the starting pitching?
Yeah, I think they really need... I just don't understand the Jim Johnson trade. I understand the money aspect of it, but...
Would you like the trade more if you think of it as Jim Johnson for Jamel Weeks and Ubaldo Jimenez? Because maybe that $10 million was just straight put to Ubaldo. Do you like it a lot more then? Because that's how I think of it.
I mean, that's how you have to think of it.
Right.
So I don't know. I just think this is a team that is not very strong in pitching, and I was just not I'm just not impressed by it. I think the Ubaldo deal you still could have afforded. I mean, maybe I'm not in the Baltimore front office looking at their money situation, but I think when you have a team that's closer than they've been in a couple years, a $10 million for a 1-year deal of Jim Johnson is maybe something you just have to eat, especially considering how good he is, or consistent, I should say. Hopefully they get some of these call-ups. They're really, really banking on their 2013 first-round pick, Hunter Hardy, to possibly help them out in the bullpen. It's a very, very quick jump, but
Yeah.
it is.
It's happened a few
possible.
times.
It has happened. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I don't know. The Baltimore Orioles are really going to rely on the star power of Manny Machado more so, and their offense.
Chris Davis, Adam Jones.
They're going to be like that team that has replacement level pitching, but if their offense can be awesome, then they have a chance to compete. But which I don't totally hate, but I think that you need pitching to win in this game. So
especially in the playoffs.
their division's going to be really tough this year. I just think they'd almost be better off just investing in next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Tommy Hunter at all. I always had a soft spot for Brian Mattis.
Yeah.
I think that he'll get traded one day and be a functional starter, 4th, 5th guy. He was a big time prospect and he just never really developed. He had an okay 2012, but he just never strikeout guy, and he had a hard time, keeping the ball in the defender's glove. Darren O'Day, I think he should be the closer.
Yeah.
Instead of Tommy Hunter. I mean, he's a lot more consistent from 2012 and 2013.
And coming out of spring training, he might be.
Yeah, this team is they could remind me of the mid 90s Indians, Cleveland Indians, where they just have a ton of hitting. If you remember those Indians teams, they had Roberto Alomar, Jim Thome, Manny Ramirez, etc., etc. Now I'm not trying to compare the player to player, but the Orioles team obviously has a great lineup right now in terms of power potential, without question. So, Kyle, you want to do some over-unders?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Chris Davis, over-under 50 home runs.
Under, but they'll have a good season again.
What do you think he gets? I mean, I feel like we need to talk about that just because he was the home run king last year.
He went from like 30 to 53 or 33 to 53?
He went 32, I believe. 33 to 53. So he jumped 20, and he only got 70 more at-bats.
I think 43 is fair.
43, you're going to try to hedge there?
Yeah.
I think he'll be over 45. I don't think he'll hit 50. I think the only one that's hit 50 is Mike Stanton. All right. Adam Jones. Let's talk about him. Over, under 30 home runs.
Under, sadly.
Okay. I disagree, but I think he'll get like 31. Is he ever going to fix his on-base percentage? It was 334 in 2012, 318 last year. For how much I harp on Nelson Cruz and types like that for their bad OBP, 318 is pretty horrible.
Yeah, no, it's really not good for your 5-year, $80 million player. I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to fix it. I think we've seen who he is.
He had 25 walks and 650 at-bats. It's horrible.
Yeah, that is horrible. But, maturity comes and it goes, so maybe he'll eventually establish himself like that. I bet you he would have had a much better OBP if he had never left Seattle.
I will say I really like Adam Jones for fantasy. The OBP doesn't really hurt you in most leagues.
No.
So he'll get the home runs, the RBIs, and he'll give you 10, 15 steals. So for fantasy players out there, Adam Jones, the walks does not hurt him that much. All right, one of my favorite plays in baseball, Manny Machado. This kid's so fun to watch. Over, under 50 doubles.
Over.
I will say under because over, under 25 home runs.
Over.
I think he'll
He's gonna be stronger than ever.
I think he'll be right at 25 home runs. Another thing to watch with him, though, in 667 at-bats, 29 walks for OBP of 314. So when you have two players and then you're adding Nelson Cruz who don't really walk, that's a concern. Because they go through ruts where they have a lot of strikeouts. And that's another thing with the postseason where you face these elite pitchers like CC. Like if they face the Yankees, they're going to go CC, Kuroda, Nova, Tanaka. And they could just pick them apart with that slider and their control and the splitters and the sliders and the off-speed pitches. So that's something that I feel like as a team they need to really work on. And I feel like Machado will be able to do it a lot easier than Adam Jones based on age, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well, just seems to have matured.
Right. And if no one knows who Manny Machado is, please look up some YouTube highlights of his defensive plays at third base. That's all I gotta say. It's incredible.
So much range.
Yeah. Matt Wieters. On base percentage. Last season, 287. That's really bad. When your on base percentage is lower than some of your teammates' batting average, and you're supposed to be a leader of the team, and you're the main cog at catcher, it's an issue. He's okay defensively, but he really needs to step it up with his bat. So, working off that, Matt Wieters, over under 250 batting average.
Over 251.
Okay, I'll take the under, but over under 25 home runs.
Under.
I'll take the over. I think he'll set a personal high in home runs. I think he'll have about 27. Yeah, I think he'll have a very good year power-wise. I'm just, once again, very concerned about that OBP. Like, this team has a lot of
Is this
holes.
team the Mariners from last year?
Absolutely not, because they have legit great players batting.
They're just going to lead the league in home runs and not get on base ever.
Over-under, for the rest of our season preview, how many times do I mention Chris Tillman's horrible picture?
Twice.
It's got to be over. It just please look at this picture. Like, if you're listening to this, it's really bad. He has buck teeth. There's a gap. He looks like an idiot.
Derek Holland and him should hang out.
Yeah. All right. Nelson Cruz over under 30 home runs.
Over.
I agree. Ubaldo Jimenez. We're going to end with him because I think he's very interesting this year. I believe in that delivery change because I feel like if Fine figures it out, he's not going to throw 97 anymore. So. Over under 200 strikeouts for Ubaldo Jimenez.
Way under.
I take over.
What?
He had 194 last year in 182 innings, and I think he's going over 200 innings.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to pitch more than 170.
Okay. Over under 3.5 ERA.
Over.
Okay.
Not into it.
I say over, but it'll be close to that. And over under a whip of 1.3.
Probably be under.
Okay. I will say last year 1.33. His all-time high 1.15 when he had that insane year with Colorado.
Yeah.
So now we're moving on to the last team in this division. Team that not a lot of stuff happened wrong for last year. They invested a lot of money in their team. Entering last season with trades for R.A. Dickey, Jose Reyes, Mark Burley came over. They signed Melky Cabrera. It just really didn't work out. Jose Bautista, their best batter, with Edwin Encarnacion injured. Brett Lawrie, they're supposed to be new, young, exciting cornerstone player, injured all the time. Brandon Morrow, their best pitcher in terms of talent, injured. R.A. Dickey, his amazing 2012 for pretty predictably, but not that bad, didn't translate. Jose Reyes got hurt. I mean, Kyle, what are your thoughts on this lineup? How good can it be? Will it ever stay healthy altogether? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the Blue Jays were headed in the right direction 2 or 3 years ago. I thought they had a lot of depth coming up. They were doing the right thing, taking the long approach.
A lot of prospects.
A lot of prospects with their talent. But I think they kind of got impatient when they saw that Miami trade dangling out there, and their team just wasn't ready to make the jump. I hated the Dickey trade. Noah Syndergaard and
Dinard.
Travis d'Arnaud. That was just one of the worst trades of last year.
Dickey's contract is pretty fair too, and it still doesn't help that trade at all.
Yeah, no, and Dickey is really up and down. His WAR was 0.6, then it was 3, and then it was back down to 0.2. I really just don't see this guy being a huge factor, the type of ace you need him to be. Morrow, we're all still waiting for you to be healthy. Hopefully you have a great season. I think you get what you get out of Burley. Some people harped on him for his horrible start last year, but I think by the end of the year he was himself again. Emil Rogers and Jay Happ. I think these are two guys that aren't going to make a significant difference. I've long wondered how Happ has stayed in the major leagues for so long. Like, I could understand him being a guy that like is a reliever or like maybe gets called in and out of the minors, but for how much faith teams seem to put in him, I've never understood it.
That 2009 year with Philadelphia rated 2.93 ERA, long time ago.
Yeah, and that was just even then, it wasn't like it was beautiful all season.
The best thing about him is he's 6'6", and when he's a reliever, he gets a lot of good downward playing on the fastball, and he can get ground balls. He's definitely not a strikeout guy. So I agree with Kyle. I don't mean to interject, but J.A. Happ is really bad, and Emil Rogers is really bad.
Yeah, their rotation's just not very deep. I do really like some of their pieces. I mean, I think Casey Jansen's a good closer. I think he'll do well in that role. He's been a good reliever for a couple years. Not dominant by any means, but I definitely think he's solid. And in Carcion, I was really blown away by his OBP. I mean, this is a guy who, for somebody regarded as a power hitter, he's got a pretty good OBP. I mean,
well, you look at 2011 for Edwin Encarnacion, triple slash 272, not bad, 334, 453. But in 2012 it jumped to 280, 384, 557. Huge jumps. And then 2013 he really kind of sustained that for the most part, and 272, 370, 534.
This is a great hitter.
Yeah.
He's been around a long time.
He finally has really developed. He was a big-time prospect for Cincinnati for a very long time, and him and Jay Bruce were supposed to both kind of tandem up and be the next wave for Cincinnati, and then Joey Votto stepped up and Jay Bruce stayed, but Encarnacion could never really, solidify his spot and got moved.
Cincinnati's had some good player development.
Yeah, they have.
Great scouting. I saw a thing on the other day that their first-round picks from, like, the last 8 years, like 7 of them start.
Yeah.
It's just like, damn, that's really rare.
Homegrown talent. Homer Bailey just got a monster extension.
Yeah.
Thought it was a slight overpay, but not really egregious.
Looked like they stole Matt Latos.
Yeah. Robert Stevenson's a really good pitching prospect for them on the way.
Really hard to steal from team as far as prospects are concerned.
Yeah. But we're talking about Cincinnati all of a sudden.
Yeah, either way. But
NL Central is next week, folks, so there's a little preview.
But yeah, I like their offense. I think Rasmus, everyone said he had a breakout year. I don't think he really had a breakout year. I think he played was the difference. He's just kind of always been that guy. I think he showed a little bit more power than he's shown, but I still think he's way too prone to strikeouts to really be counted on. I don't know what you can expect from Cabrera. If he hits 300, great, but I still don't think he's a dominant force. Bautista's one of those players that they just have to trade. Like, I just think this team should be in sell mode. Like, you should be selling off Encarnacion, Bautista, Reyes, and really trying to build around the future of, like, Morrow, Stroman, and Aaron Sanchez and some of these types. Maybe you keep one of those guys and hope that they stay good into the twilight of their career, but I think they could compete. I just think that it's unlikely given their pitching. I think it's going to falter down the stretch, and you can't bank on Bautista and Carcion carrying it every single game. How do you feel about, like, their lineup? Do you think they're going to get on base enough to make those home runs worth it? Do you see Reyes being a dominant force, like MVP candidate, making a difference?
I've always really liked Jose Reyes. I think he just works really hard, and he just gets hurt all the time. I would love to have him on the Mariners, but he just has a really hard time staying healthy. I mean, I will say in 2012, played 160 games, had a very solid year. Last year, when he was healthy, had a great batting year. 296, 350, 420, 15 steals, 6 caught. I mean, entering his 30s, he's not going to run as much as he did in his younger days. People forget, in 2007, he had 78 steals. I mean, this cat ran. He went 60, 64, 78, 56 in 4 years straight for the Mets. So he can steal a base. He knows what he's doing. The defense is starting to slip it short. I think that he may move to second or third base. but he can't really hit that well enough to really move there.
Well,
So
he can
he's-
hit well.
You know, I mean, when you think of third baseman, you think of power. And second baseman is becoming that way too a little bit in terms of Cano and Utley and Kinsler and Jason Kipnis, things like that.
Yeah,
So I mean, I love Reyes.
he's always
But
going to hit so well for average.
I really agree with Kyle that they really need to just tear it down. I don't like Melky Cabrera. That year with San Francisco, you can't really prove that it was completely aided, but just the on-base percentage in and of itself is just astronomically high based off his career. That was his career year, if you want to think of it in that way to be nice about it. Jose Bautista, still a great batter. You can get a lot for Jose Bautista. He's only 33. He should be good for another 4 or 5 years. Obviously has tons of power. Slugging still in the 500s.
I think he's almost got the most raw power game.
He's
For
up there.
size and strength.
I mean, if you think of him on the 2080 scouting scale, he's probably, 65, 70. There's not too many 80s in baseball. Stan is the only one I can think of in terms of a, 2080 power scale.
he's like huge.
Yeah, he's crazy.
I'm just
So
saying.
you could get a lot for Batista. You could move Reyes even with his health problems. Shortstop is not a deep position. There's some young guys coming up, but they're not ready. Brett Lowry, I think, is one of those players that you would keep just because his trade value is so low and his potential is pretty high. He's got great size. He's from Canada.
You always want to keep that guy.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, the Canada thing, it helps with marketing. It really does. Look at Ichiro in Seattle. Not only was he an amazing player, there was tons of Ichiro shirts and jerseys around.
Oh, yeah.
It really does help. Encarnacion, you could get a ton for. His contract is very team friendly.
Oh, dude.
Great hitter, of course. If someone needs a DH, he can just slide right into that, or he could play a little bit of first base.
This is a team that could compete in 2 years with those two guys alone.
Yeah.
I mean, possibly.
R.A. Dickey you could move even with his extension. He wasn't too horrible last year. It's just the fact that you moved that much and he did not repeat the 2012 with the Mets. But, I
He
mean,
could retire next year, too. You might
Yeah.
as well get some for him.
absolutely. Although knuckleballers can pitch forever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do like Dickey. He's a fourth starter in the American League. Maybe a third if that knuckleball falls a little bit better. I love Brandon Morrow, but you can't really count on him to stay healthy. You can't.
Yeah.
He's really good, but I really feel like Seattle ruined him a bit when they try to go closer starter. I mean, he has great stuff, and he doesn't even walk that many batters for the most part. Dustin McGowan and Steve Delbar contribute to a very solid bullpen. Steve Delbar last year, 82 strikeouts, 58 innings. Crazy good K rate.
Yeah.
Dustin McGowan had a very good ERA, failed starter. I actually really was high on him as a starter. 2007, but he's missed a lot of time because of injuries. Just look at his ESPN player card. 05, 06, 07, 09, 08, and then 2011, and then 2013. So there's a reason he's in the bullpen now, so he doesn't get hurt. Kyle, anything else you want to mention? I think we both can agree really quick. This is probably the worst team in the division before we do over-unders.
Yeah. I just, I understand what they were thinking a little bit by making that trade, but you're looking at a team now that if they had sold off instead of trying to take advantage of a window, this could have been a really big team
Yeah.
2 years from now. So, unfortunate, but that's kind of the way it goes. So,
I will say, keep your eye out on Marcus Stroman. He's an undersized starting pitching prospect who some think should be a reliever because of that size. I'm really high on him. I think he's going to start this season in the rotation. He's going to replace Rogers. They'll probably keep Happen there. I think he's going to be really good.
yeah, I don't know why we totally forgot to mention him.
Yeah, I saw that
We
and I
both
kind of
had
saved
talked about
for
how we
it.
wanted to bring him up.
Toronto, they may feel bad for their fans and try to move Aaron Sanchez for a Jeff Samardzija type. That's been a rumor before. I don't like that move. Sanchez, although his development stagnated a little, still has a lot of potential. So, Kyle, thoughts on Stroman really quick, because I know you like him.
Oh, I just think that he got passed up in the draft because of his size.
Yep.
But I think he's quickly proven that size is not everything. Throws hard. His only problem is going to be,
Home runs.
home runs. But I mean,
He has great secondary stuff, too.
yeah, even then, I mean, this is a guy who I feel like he's kind of like Alex Gonzalez in that way. Like you didn't want to draft him because maybe he didn't have the top end, but this is a guy who at the his lowest is probably going to be like a 4-3 starter. And I love drafting that in the first 2 rounds, personally. Especially if I'm not picking in the top 15, So, anyways, great pickup. I think they got him in the 2nd round. So.
He was a first-round pick. I might have been 19th, 23rd. I'm not an MLB draft expert, but I know he was in the 1st round.
Yeah.
So, over-unders before we pick our division winners and the standings. Jose Bautista, 40 home runs, over-under.
Over.
I take under.
I'm hoping he has a great season.
Edwin Encarnacion, over-under 30 home runs.
Over 30? Over 30.
I take over as well. Jose Reyes, over-under 130 games played.
Over. I think he'll be healthy this year.
I'll take the over. Brett Lowry, this is just a general question. Does he take a step forward and become what everyone thought he was going to be? Closer to it.
I think so. I think he's got some veteran leadership around him. I think once the club starts to play a little bit better, he'll play a little better.
I agree. R.A. Dickey, over under 3.75 ERA.
Over.
I'll take the under.
Okay.
Brandon Morrow, I'll let you do this one. I'm
Okay.
a biased gentleman.
Over under 170 strikeouts.
Over.
Okay. Over under 180 innings.
I would take the over, but I would take the under at 200.
Okay. Over under top 5 Cy Young finish.
He's going to be right there. I've said it before. I think he has the talent to win a Cy Young. I think the team record, if he stays healthy like I expect, will hold him down because there's so many great pitchers. I mean, I can name like 8 pitchers that are all incredible. I mean, Darvish, Scherzer, Verlander, Hernandez, Sale. Bam, that's 5 right there.
Yeah, without even thinking about it.
And we're both really high in Nova. So, I mean, I would say no, he will not be in the top 5, and it pains me to say that.
Right. All right. Well, there you go.
All right, so Kyle, give me your division standings.
So I think Tampa Bay is going to win this division. I really like their pitching. I like their defense. I think they're a veteran-savvy team who's kept a good core together over the last couple of years. I think the New York Yankees are going to come in second. I like all the additions they made for this year. I can't really speak on what they're going to look like in the next 2 or 3 years as these guys get older. But I think they're going to make an impact. All these guys are going to be excited to be Yankees. Red Sox, I think, are going to be 3, followed by Baltimore, Toronto. I think Baltimore and Toronto just have a little ways to go. If Baltimore's pitching can improve this year and Bundy can come up and show something, I think they're possibly a really scary team next year. But that being said, how do you feel about this division going forward?
I have the New York Yankees winning the division this year. I feel like they made a lot of really good moves that were very short-sighted, but will be very beneficial this season. I have Tampa Bay second. I have Boston third. I could easily see 3 teams getting to those wild card spots, Tampa and Boston potentially.
Yeah.
Baltimore's a very good 4th-place team, but the pitching holds them back, and I think Toronto will be very bad this year. Their record's going to look really bad because of the division they play in as well.
Yeah.
So, any quick thoughts, Kyle?
I'm excited for, the future of this division. I think the Red Sox are working on potentially building a dynasty with some of the prospects they have. We'll see if that comes to fruition or if they just fall flat on their face. I'd love to see all these contracts with the Yankees totally not work out because they would be totally screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any thoughts for you on this division? It's one of the most competitive.
It's definitely the most talked about division for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
New York, Boston, mainly, of course.
Yeah.
Who would you rather have for the next 5 years? Will Myers, Xander Bogaerts?
That is an incredible question. I really like that question. That is very tough because Bogaerts is a really good defender at a more important position.
Yep.
He also, his plate presence was just light years beyond what I would expect for a kid his age. I'm almost going to have to say Bogaerts. I think he might actually be one of the rarest talents that we've seen in a long time.
Could he be the Manny Machado of shortstops?
I think he could be better.
Which is funny because Machado's supposed to be a shortstop.
Yeah, well, I think that Machado may make more amazing defensive plays, but Bogarts, OBP, I think is going to be 3.5 plus every year.
Yeah,
Like,
starting
he's-
this season, I
He
agree.
is just incredible, and if he could even hit for more than 15 home runs,
He will.
which he will, I think so too. What about you? I mean, Myers, we're both really high on. He's a beast, but that's tough competition.
For the next 5 years, obviously, assuming they're both healthy, of course, with a question like this, I would take Xander Bogaerts
Yeah.
because he's your shortstop.
That being said, though,
Myers is
did
incredible.
he didn't show over the whole year. That
He
was
actually did
really
better
legit.
than I was expecting last
But
year.
he's 24 and Bogart's 21.
Yeah.
Or 21, yeah. So, I don't know. You're also seeing a much more mature product in Will Myers.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Ooh, that's a good one, though. I think the position bumps him up
Yep.
just a bit.
I will say it's a lock. Will Myers is better this season as a batter. It's a
Oh, I
100%
think so.
lock.
I agree with you. 100%.
And that's not really going out on a limb because of the age thing,
Yeah.
but still, like, it'll be a big
Yeah,
gap.
'cause Myers
It'll be a
could-
big gap.
Myers could hit 30 home runs, steal 10 bases.
Myers could be 300, 380, 480
Yeah.
this season.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big gap this year.
Apparently 100 RBIs.
I'll shake and bet a beer on that right
Hey
now.
man, I'm not gonna go against you. You sound pretty confident, and honestly, I trust you. I think he's a great player, and I see a lot of the same improvements you're seeing. So, I was just trying to be a little bit, ginger on the situation, just because I didn't know, like how that lineup's gonna hit. So, but still. I think that's a great question. Exciting division going forward. I think the Toronto Blue Jays could be one of like the third best teams in like maybe some other division, but they're in one of the best divisions. So it's sad that how much better they have to be to compete than a normal team. So for that, anyways, we'll see you next time, folks. I guess I'm Kyle.
Yep. I'm Malay. See you next week. Hopefully, NL Central.
Yep.
That's what we're pulling on. St. Louis, Cincinnati, very interesting. Pittsburgh, can they repeat?
Right.
I'm going to let you know right now. Garrett Cole's winning the National League Cy Young.
Preview.
It's a little snippet. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone.
Peace.